Point Made, the Centrepoint podcast by young people for all people.
Centrepoint is the UK's leading youth homelessness charity. At Centrepoint, we believe no young person's life should be defined by homelessness. We give young people the support they need to heal and grow no matter what. For over 50 years, we've been the Centrepoint for change, personal and political. Everyone has their part to play, with young people leading the way. This podcast has been created by young people with lived experience of homelessness. We'll be shining a spotlight on some of the issues that affect us. We hope to challenge and change some of the stereotypes and bring others with us as part of a movement to end youth homelessness for good.
This time we're recording from one of Centrepoint's partners, CAT Footwear. At the end of the episode, there will be a short interview with Daisy Flood from CAT Footwear, where we talk to her about the partnership with Centrepoint and how they support the charity's work. But in the meantime, thank you for supporting the podcast. Welcome to Point Made, the Centrepoint podcast by young people for all people. I'm Meg, my pronouns are she, her. I'm a media officer at Centrepoint and the co-chair of the LGBTQ+ inclusion group. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the realities of being LGBTQ+, female and homeless, and what it's like when these identities intersect with different cultural backgrounds and upbringings too. We will also be talking about what it means to be out and proud and the challenges this brings. But before we get into the discussion, I'd like to introduce our panel. Please could you introduce yourselves and tell me why you wanted to come on this podcast?
Hi, I'm Maya and my pronouns are she, her, and I work for Stonewall Housing, which is more important than ever in the cost of living crisis. And we're seeing a huge spike of homelessness, so I thought it was important to speak about it.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a young person from Centrepoint. I used to live there last year. I lived there for 7 months and I was supported by them in every way. And yeah, luckily now I'm in a better place. I've got a job, I've got a house. So a lot of it was thanks to Centrepoint as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mia. I'm 22. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm also a young person from Centrepoint. And I'm here on this podcast to bring some more awareness on what it's like to be LGBTQ and homeless.
Cool, thanks everyone. So we know from research by Albert Kennedy Trust that a quarter of homeless young people are LGBTQ+. Many of these have been rejected from their families because of their sexuality, and others have been fleeing abusive situations. So Maya, what is it that you've seen happening at Stonewall Housing?
So at Stonewall Housing, we have quite a variety of people who come and ask to use our services. Quite a large proportion of those people come from ethnic minority backgrounds. I think there was a statistic that in 2020, 82% of people who used our services attributed their homelessness or their situation to cultural and religious reasons as to why they became homeless. So it's a huge spike. And I think in the discussion about homelessness, I think sometimes culture and religion gets put on the back burner and people forget about it. And I think especially, like, I know from being from a minority background, how much your family relationships are also to do with your financial stability, your emotional stability, everything like that. So when those things get uprooted, we have people who come to us who are really in dire situations. I started up an organisation during lockdown, specifically for queer people of colour, and we figured that such a huge issue amongst that community in particular was homelessness and being rejected by family because of sexuality, which was another reason I wanted to move over to Stonewall Housing. But for myself, I had been really lucky with my housing situation. But I see it all the time, and it's really awful to see, to be honest.
Yeah, relating to what Maya said regarding coming from an ethnic minority and being LGBTQ. I mean, that's literally the reason for my homelessness and me going to Centrepoint, is because they're very religious. It's just they just have a different culture, and that's really not acceptable in our culture. And if you are not what they expect you to be or want you to be, then you're disowned. And even though that hurts them probably more than it hurts you, that's just the way it is, and that's how it's always been. And yeah, that's why I went to Centrepoint, and that has caused a lot of pain to a lot of my friends, me, and the people who come from ethnic minorities, and that's the reason why we go therapy now.
I think for me, it was a lot different due to the fact that I was put into care because my family just couldn't understand the reasoning behind my mental illness. But me coming out was just the cherry on top. And luckily being placed in Centrepoint and being placed in foster care, I did realize that I'm not alone in the situation, and I met a lot of other people, including my partner right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. Little mention.
Shout out for you.
So those all sound like, really challenging things to go through. But just a little side note, you said that you two met at Centrepoint. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was kind of unexpected because I had seen other people get into relationships at Centrepoint, and it never looked like it worked out well. But I mean, we both moved out of Centrepoint fairly recently, and we're like still together. And yeah, I don't know. What do you want to say about that, Hannah?
Well, yeah, she just took one look at me and she just fell head over heels.
Okay.
She just started following me everywhere. Sorry.
That is not true.
that is
not true. I actually thought she was a music teacher coming to teach a music lesson.
I was teaching there because I was playing guitar and singing, and then she sat down and started singing with me. Then we started hanging out, and now we've moved in together.
Yeah.
Aww. That's so sweet.
Shout out to Centrepoint. Thank you.
Everyone from Centrepoint is invited to the wedding.
Oh, okay, shout that out. Centrepoint matchmaking service. So, you two met in the service, and being in the service and meeting other people like Hannah. How did that affect your experiences? Was it quite a positive? Was obviously quite a positive force.
Definitely, it was quite eye-opening. Seeing people of the same ethnicities, especially having gone through very similar situations. Like I said, it really made me feel like I wasn't alone. I think the one thing I recognized from culture and I think the one thing I realized was that it may seem like there's unconditional love comes from like your family, until these situations of I'm gay or I'm trans that pops up, and it's like all of a sudden very conditional. So to be in a space at Centrepoint where there's other young people that are all looking for stability and love and just recognition, is really helps you to thrive and grow as a young person who's just trying to find their own way, because obviously, especially now with the cost of living, it's like that's a whole nother added issue on top of the fact of, dealing with maybe internalized homophobia and so on.
I just want to say maybe because what came out for me was that about internalized homophobia, because I think that's something that I really experienced. And I come from a family where I didn't really have any issues coming out. It was more just like my own issues, really. So I think that you said that on top of everything else,
on top of cost of living and having no family, you see other young people with a support group, and basically trying to figure out who you are, and then on top of that, the internalized homophobia.
That's what I was going to say, because I think for me, like, yeah, I experienced internalized homophobia, and that's something that I struggled with. And when I think about it, having that, and then also, you know, having a community where it's not accepted either, like, thankfully my family were quite accepting of it. So I guess, yeah, having both, like, I can't imagine, it must have been really tough.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest challenge, like, to your coming out stories?
Initially, it was obviously the internalized homophobia and the denial, and then you start hating yourself, and then coming out, you know what's gonna happen because it happens to everyone around you who's like from ethnic minority and as LGBTQ. You're gonna get kicked out, disowned. If you're not in a good place, maybe even killed. But I guess if there's anything good that came out of it is that at least we're living our truth, and we're gonna break that cycle of abuse. So we're gonna be the change. If we have kids, they will never face any issues of acceptance or emotional abuse or any of that we've gotten. So it's breaking the cycle, and we know we're gonna make the world a little bit better in the future, at least better than it was.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think, yeah, breaking the cycle is a great way of seeing it. And Mia, what about you?
I think the hardest challenge was obviously losing my siblings and, like, you know, not being able to see them anymore. Also feeling like I couldn't tell everyone, or, like, you know, sometimes I think I also, like, hid it from certain people because I didn't know if they were, like, an ally. So it felt like I was still, like, hiding things and not really living my true authentic self. I think also judgment from my own community, especially coming from a really religious community. I mean, it's already a lot having to not cover myself up in public. On top of that, even, like, just being with Hannah, it's, like, really hard because as much as people like to say that London is, and I do agree, it is quite, like, a safe space for LGBT people, it still doesn't feel that way because I can't hold hands with her in certain areas, or we can't, you know, kiss in certain areas. And I think that's a really hard struggle.
Yeah, definitely. And Maya, what about you?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really nice to hear, but also really difficult. So I think, like, a lot of the time, a lot of people use the word, like, there's a cultural barrier, and I never know whether that's a good thing to say or not good thing to say, because the idea of a barrier is something that stops you. But I realize, like, again, with the work that I do with the project, the QPOC project, that a lot of people manage to they build a new relationship with their religion and with their culture whilst also being gay or being bisexual, being trans, and that's something that's just really lovely to see. And I think in London, because there's such a high rate of queer people, especially queer people from different backgrounds, it's kind of like this new generation, this new wave of culture and religion that I don't think, maybe it doesn't sit right with older generations, but it's kind of like finding a way that works for you. But yeah, just from, like, what you said, I wanted to ask you, like, do you feel as though, like, you've developed a new kind of relationship with your cultural identity now that you're kind of more comfortable in your sexual identity?
Oh, definitely. I think it opened up space for me to actually dive deep into my, like, culture, and, like, because I feel like a lot of it growing up was just heavily based on, it was more religion over culture. So I got the chance to, like, really do my research on, you know, where I've come from, how my ancestors were. And I think I also developed a better relationship in terms of my spirituality, because I think I went through a lot of hardships with, like, trying to accept where I stood with religion. So that's, like, still a journey for me. But I think once I accepted my sexuality, it definitely opened doors for me to accept other parts of myself. And I like what you said, how there's like, you know, a new generation of like queer people that are like opening up different conversations in that aspect. It's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say as well, I feel like the reason why like the queer community is so like groundbreaking and it really kind of disrupts society is because, especially within cultural groups and communities, for thousands of years, like society has functioned in one way. And then, you know, when you have two men fall in love, two women fall in love, and it goes against that, you start to see the cracks show in terms of, you see what really is important, like reputation is important. The way my family looks to other families in that same religion and same culture, that, you know, that's embarrassing, or X, Y, and Z. And then it kind of boils down to, again, you know, you've got this saying, love is love, because essentially love is what makes the world go round, whether that's, you know, you as a woman falling in love with a woman, you realizing, actually, you know, I'm in the wrong body. I think it's just like this idea of disruption, and I think, again, that's got negative connotations associated to it, but really, like, it does boil down to when you make these like really bold choices to kind of remove yourself from family, remove yourself from financial ties and emotional ties, and it's such a huge thing to do, especially in a country which is not majority what your family are. It's just like such a bold and brave thing to do.
Off the back of that, like, do you think it is kind of almost a cycle of like, rather than it just being like all one community thinking one thing, do you think it is like a cycle of like worrying about what someone else in the community thinks? It's like you said about having to like cut yourself off from other ties, or
I think like the other issue that, like, to do with what you just said, the other issue is that I think, because we live in a Western society, I think people, I mean, often I hear the phrase thrown around like, oh, like that community's not quite there yet. They're not quite accepting yet. But like, again, like, not to be that person that throws the word colonization around, but, you know, like, queer people have existed forever. And that's like such an important thing to remember, because I think, you know, people think that we're further back in time, we're not quite there yet. But really, when you've got all the kind of like cultural stipulations attached to you, you've got so many obstacles to overcome to then allow yourself to be happy. And then you are kind of left in that situation, which is what you guys have done, where you kind of throw your hands up and say, well, actually, this is too much. I've just got to remove myself completely, and then slowly like build my way back to it.
If you look at history, there have been like so many countries that, you know, pre-colonization were very open in terms of like what we would see now as queerness, but that's completely been stripped away.
Yeah, I think it's more culture, even more so than religion, in my opinion, that kind of holds our families back than being accepting. It's just the fear of other people judging them and just wanting to be accepted.
yeah, no, I think those are all really interesting points. And yeah, I guess if it is like you said, like even pre-colonization, things were a lot different. That's still like years and years of learning to get to like where we are now. What do you kind of think would help now to just like encourage more respect and understanding within like all communities, really? I mean, you can talk from the position of your own community or just all communities as a whole.
I feel like it really just boils down to seeing one another as our own individual person, and just, you know, like I said before, with like unconditional love until it becomes conditional. I think just if we all just kept things very simple.
I would say maybe exposure until it becomes a norm, and then they just get used to it. No, not really.
I mean, they get exposed and then they get angry, innit?
Yeah, true.
I think it's just like a way of
Exposure
thinking.
therapy.
Yeah, it's just a way of thinking. Yeah.
And it's also like, I mean, not just from like people from ethnic minority backgrounds, but like even like the current sort of situation, the way politics is moving at the moment. you know, people like are very quick to like point fingers and say, oh, you know, the snowflakes or like the young people. But like, if you really think about the agenda we're pushing, it's actually just coming from a place of acceptance and love. So I don't actually think that there is just like one quick fix for people who for thousands of years have thought one way. Like, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be hard to change your mind.
You
And
just have to wait until
Yeah.
the next generation comes, and then the next generation, and then until everyone's accepting.
And I think it also just boils down to like, do you, as a parent, do you not want your child to be happy? I think that's the bottom line. Or as a friend, or as any person who you love who is queer, like, do you not want them to be happy? Because that is the bottom line. You've got this life. I'd want you to be happy, and presumably my parents would too. So yeah.
The thing is, like, that we're not hurting anyone. We're not doing anything wrong to you know, to affect anyone else in a negative way. It's just so baffling why they wouldn't accept something that's completely benign, and it's just love, you know.
Yeah. I think also just like if things were more communal, I feel like, you know, how things have been set up with, like, you know, nuclear families, everything being kept at home, people wanting their family to look a certain way and not wanting to bring shame on their family. I think if everything was just more open and we were all more communal, these conversations could be much more easier to digest, because, you know, there's other families that also are coming to terms with the fact that their child might be LGBTQ. So I think this whole shame and fear mongering and all of that is just needs to go.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it's not going to be like an easy fix, and it's going to take time, and there's like unfortunately going to be a lot of like casualties along the way, and I think that's kind of what happens now. And but I think, you know, what one of you two said earlier, just about like breaking the cycle, and like Maya, you were saying about like, you know, your parents being happy for you, and then you would be happy for like your children, and then kind of like I guess it is like about creating like a new cycle. A question to you all then: what advice would you give to other young people who have found themselves homeless because of their sexuality? Hannah, do you want to start?
I know it's scary. I know it feels like the end of the world, just how we felt in the beginning. I know you just don't want to keep going, but in the end, it's gonna be okay, as long as just try to get up every day. Just try to keep going with life, even if you get up just to eat one meal a day, and then day after day you'll just get over it slowly. You just start believing in yourself again, and you'll start working on yourself again, and you'll realize that it's just all part of your journey, and eventually down the line you'll realize that all of that was for a reason, whether you believe that or not, and all of that has shaped you and has made you the strong person you are. And you wouldn't be as kind or as strong or as you know, patient or as helpful as you would be now, if it weren't for all the challenges that you've been through. And that's how I genuinely feel. And yeah.
Thank you for saying that. And yeah, Mia, what would you say?
I would say go, you know, search up online, go look on Instagram, on TikToks, try find communities of like other young people, or like charities that are giving either like therapy or like just, you know, spaces where you can feel accepted and not feel like you have to be afraid, and, you know, look into the things that you really have enjoyed or wanted to do but couldn't do until now, and go for it. Like, you know, journal, make new friends. You can even change your name if you want to. It's a, you know, you can restart everything, but also just remember to, you know, appreciate solitude and really dive deep into yourself, so you don't have to carry all of this with you. And yeah, just know that it will all be okay in the end.
And Maya, what advice would you give to like young people, I guess the ones that are coming to Stonewall Housing or Centrepoint, other charities like that?
I think the most important thing to remember, again, I'm not speaking from my own experiences, but from the people I've seen in these situations, is you have to remember that you are not an extension of your family, and you are not an extension of anybody but yourself. So I think a lot of people, they stay in domestic abuse, relationships with domestic abuse, or just abuse in general, because, you know, it's family or it's friends, and that's, you know, oh, I have to make an exception for that. But no, that's not the case. You know, life is precious and it's short, and you know, it's so important to be happy and really ask yourself, am I happy, and could I be happier? And if that is a question of kind of completely uprooting your life and starting from scratch, whether you're 15, whether you're 25, whether you're 60, it's never too late, and you really do have to take that opportunity. And also that, whilst, you know, it might not feel particularly positive in the current political climate, you know, there is always, like, everyone who you see again on Instagram, on TikTok, whatever, they all started from somewhere. They all got to be where they are, and have their voices heard from, you know, just from working from the ground up. So that could be you. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. The QPOP project is, it's about the QPOC, Queer People of Colour Project. We are an organisation. We run all kinds of events, from social to educational, and we are a safe space for anybody who identifies under that umbrella. So yeah, find us anywhere on Instagram, online. Please do come along to our next event.
Yeah, so thanks, a massive thanks to everyone for coming along today. Thank you, Maya, Mia, and Hannah. We really appreciate you sharing your experiences and all of your stories, and giving other young people advice who's going through similar situations. It's been a really inspiring and insightful discussion, and one that's raised a lot of questions too. So big thanks also to our listeners. Please continue to support this podcast and like, subscribe, and share.
Thank you, Meg.
Thank you. Hi, Daisy. Thank you for giving us the space to be able to record this podcast today. Just going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about the history of CAT Footwear?
Yeah, so CAT Footwear is a division of Caterpillar Inc. We originated in the early 1990s, expanding the brand into durable and reliable footwear. So we're known mainly for our work boots, but we also now offer a wide range of casual and lifestyle footwear for men, women, and unisex. All of our products are infused with cat DNA, and our innovative products really reflect the ruggedness and authenticity, making our shoes suitable for both work, outdoor, and everyday leisure.
Oh, amazing. And why did you want to partner with Centrepoint? Why did CAT Footwear want to partner with them?
Yeah, so youth homelessness is not just a UK issue, it's a global issue. And as a brand, we really wanted to aim to raise awareness and take action to address this pressing problem. And as there is a vast amount of homelessness between 16 to 24-year-olds, the high cost of living, the whole situation with the economy, and we really believe this shouldn't be happening in the 21st century. So together, we all can make a difference in the world.
Thank you. And what have been some of the highlights of the partnership so far?
So participating in the Centrepoint Awards in November 2021 was really a humbling experience for us. So I actually presented an award to a young adult who transformed his life, and it was really truly inspirational to listen to his story, as well as all of the young adults that got presented an award, as well as listening to their journeys.
And do you have a message for the young people supported by Centrepoint?
Yeah, so really from personal experience, I can share the importance of not giving up. Life can be really challenging in various ways sometimes, and it might feel easier to abandon our aspirations. However, the true reward really lies in the success of achieving something despite our obstacles. So the struggles we face on the journey will be remembered, but they will ultimately make the achievement more meaningful and shape who we are today.
Thank you.